Okay, coming back. How's everyone doing? Okay. All right. So as we move on and we talk about uh, phonics and other aspects, I want to just go back to the very basic premise is that we learned on Monday is that the brain is wired for speech, right? Speech happens naturally. We don't have to teach it, it happens. Reading doesn't happen naturally. It repurposes parts of the brain that are used and were used in illiterate cultures and illiterate people for other functions. And as we learn to read, those parts of the brain are rewired to use for reading and the original function of facial recognition and other recognition actually moves to a different part of the brain. But so the brain is now being rewired to read. So Dr. Louisa Moats and others over the years have promoted that we should use that speech to print framework to help us with our reading. Because the brain is wired for speech, let's take that speech and relate it to print, as opposed to the reverse of going initially from print to speech. So when we read, say, instead of starting, here are these letters, this is what it says, let's start with here's what you say, let me show you what it looks like. Let me show you how to encode it. So that means that we will encode before we decode. Encode is to put the sounds we hear and code it down with these squiggles that we call letters on paper. And then decode, take those squiggles and convert them back into a spoken language. So using that speech to print from the words we already know and converting it to squiggles. So speech to print, that means that we should start with encoding, with spelling, with writing the words, with putting the words down that are already in our knowledge and putting it down on paper, and use that to then bridge to then being able to decode. So with our beginning students, we talk about, the word is cat, what do you hear? And we can talk about the sounds you hear. And we put the sounds down on paper, or, when they were little, we would use the magnetic letters on the refrigerator, right? And you would say, oh, you're right, cat starts with the C, and then the A and the T, and that says cat. So however we're doing it, that we encourage the speech to print, the word you hear, then taken down to what you have on paper. Eventually, we need to, going through that process, we then need to learn enough that we can then do the reverse, which is decoding. So let's keep that in mind, that we're going to encode first as a bridge to then learn decoding. So as we encode, so I just want to cover some basics here. As we encode, the physical act of writing is preferred to computer. It just is. The physical act of writing associates a kinesthetic and tactile impulse or input to the brain that aids in corresponding to the sound. And that's when we talked about in the primary levels, and we'll look at it again today very quickly, the using the letter formation to support the sounds represented by those letters. But right now, we're talking about older kids, and we're talking about COVID, and what can we do now? So it is super hard to see and teach writing virtually. And none of us has a great way that is equitable, because, yeah, we've got some families that have the means to let you see what they're doing. Oh, they'll buy their kid a document camera so you can see their hand, or they have these other things that you can see their hands. The best we can do is sometimes say, tilt your monitor or tilt your computer laptop part down a little bit so it shows me what you're doing on the paper. And the ones that have iPads, it's like, oh, that's tough to get that position. So it's difficult. So we're just going to recognize it's difficult and we can't do everything we'd like to do and we know we should do right now. And hopefully we'll get back to having our kids in person safely so we can support it in a classroom. And but that's difficult. So handwriting and pencil grip. Pencil grip. So we get to kids that are, you know, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, and they're like, oh, this is just the way I do it. I'm not going to fix it. And so that's the balancing act. I relearned to hold my pencil correctly when I was in my 40s. So I think a kid who's 9 can learn to rehold their pencil. You know, so we can do it. The question is, you know, you have to prioritize your fights. So if it's a little bit off, maybe you just leave it. If it's a lot off and it's going to impede their ability to put down on paper what they need to in life, then you fix it, right? So the correct position, and when I say correct, I'm talking about what the OT people will tell us is correct, is that we use the tripod grip. So it's 3 fingers supporting the pencil. Tri meaning 3 fingers supporting the pencil. The other 2 fingers against the palm of your hand. In very young children, it's appropriate to keep these fingers in a line. So as they rest their hand, those other fingers support. As they get older, we want to see 3 fingers here, 2 here. We want to see this kept in as straight a line as possible so that they're not crooked. Because the second you do this, you're setting the kid up for failure, so that they have carpal tunnel issues, or they're the ones who are going to say, oh, my hand's tired, I can't do anymore, I can't write. And the second they hate writing and can't write, you know that they choose the shortest words and the fewest words to put down on paper to satisfy their assignment instead of letting their thoughts come out on paper. So if you see odd grips that impedes the student's ability to write effortless, you know, with minimal effort, fix it. And in a classroom, it's what I would do in a classroom is I'd look over and my quick way of checking is I would just check what direction was the pencil pointing. If it looks like it's pointing over their shoulder of their writing hand, then they're probably holding it correctly. I can't see that virtually, but that's what I would do in a classroom. Because when you see your pencil in a different position, you know they're holding an odd grip, right? If your pencil's like this, they're holding it odd. They're either really crooking their hand or they've got a really odd grip. Okay, so 5th grade up, if it's something that you know that it's going to mean that they will not do their writing well because it hurts too much or it's too uncomfortable or too slow or too painful, fix it. We want to see a minimum pressure here on your finger. We don't want to see this. Too much pressure tires the hand. A tired hand will not write, right? The kids will not produce the writing that we will want to produce.
So in
Minimal pressure.
pre-K and the kindergarten, those fatter ones, you know, the ones that kind of look like a prism, are those, do those help?
Those help, and pencil grips help if they're not too heavy.
Okay.
Because some of those pencils are like, man,
Yeah.
I would be tired writing with that. That thing weighs a ton.
Right.
But if it's light, if it's one of the ones,
Okay.
and because the prism ones allows 3 surfaces for your 3 fingers. So yeah. Or the pencil grips that have 3 surfaces or 3 indentations for your fingers helps. There were all sorts of tricks we would do because kids would do that and then they'd go like this. And so, you know, I'd put a hairband around your wrist and, you know, loop it here just to remind the student to keep their their pencil rested in the crook of their hand and not like this, because the second it's like this, you know that they're using too much grip. In our digital age, most of our kids, fourth grade and up, are going to do more of their work on a computer. We still know that handwriting and handwritten notes improves recall. It improves learning. So the balance of, is it worth the time to fix it? And how much time is it going to take? You know, that's that balance issue. And I would definitely work on the ones, if a student is having trouble still in third grade and up, if this child is having trouble with reversals, confusing letters, B or D, N or U, M or W, any of those, B, D, P, Qs, I would absolutely work with the handwriting on that, because we know that connection, you know, you are getting muscle memory and connecting the kinesthetic movement here, connecting it to the sound, connecting it to the vision, that multisensory aspect of getting all those neurons firing at the same time works on improving recall. We're trying to dig ruts in the road of making it really easy to find that piece of information in the brain. And the more directions you hit that piece of information from, the better we're able to retrieve it. So multisensory helps. Whether or not you have the time is going to be a question of need. So you assess the need of the student. If the student needs it because they're still having reversals at this age, then you use it. If the student needs fixing pencil grip because they will not be able to successfully do what they need to in life, fix it. Right? I mean, I have carpal tunnel issues because of having a crooked grip, I guess, for most of my life.
Emily, quick question. When you talk about grip, I don't know if anybody else is left-handed here, but
Are you lefty?
All right, Jackie, that's probably why we get along too. So it's like being a lefty, you know, people meaning teachers are always telling us, you got to lift your hand, you're not gripping it right, you got to, you know, and we as left-handers, as Jackie knows, we have a tendency to smear. We kind of go from left to right. You're like trying to grip it, so we're always trying to correct ourselves. Do you see a difference between left-handers and right-handers, or is that something you're going to get into later?
Well, so what they say is you still want to have, the tendencies for lefties is so that you don't smear, is that you hook and you write over. And that hook is painful over time, right? Jackie, do you have issue with that? No? So do you hook as you write? Or
I
have
don't
you learned?
but I've seen a ton of lefties do it.
Oh,
Okay.
great. You just leave me out there. Okay, it's just me. Okay, thanks, Jackie.
No. There's many lefties who hook because you don't want to smear. So as you do it, so what I say is that if you hold your pencil too close to the tip, you are, and I should mention this is also true for right-handers. If you hold your pencil too close to the grip, you don't see your tip, and you'll see right-handed people, they'll get their heads lower and lower and lower because they can't see what they're writing because they've now obscured the port that they're writing. So push it back a little.
That's what I do.
Yes. So you write with your grip a little further away from the point, or do you put your head down?
No, I put my head way down.
Yeah, okay. But
I used to.
extending the point a little helps some. And then how much do you angle your paper?
A lot.
A lot.
It's
Yeah.
sideways.
So generally we would say right-handed people will angle it this much, and as they're writing this way, and left-handed people, they'll say write it this way, but then you're crooking, right? Or you can't see, so then you put your head down. So often left-handed people's, what I've seen successful is a greater angle, so they are still able to see the point and still maintain the health of their wrist. But
still messy.
however you can do it, what we do know is that handwriting promotes learning. So if you can use handwriting to promote the learning, use it. If it's going to be painful, fix it. And whether or not it's worth the time, otherwise, that's the balancing act. I've seen kids that it's like they've been so happy to spend the time on it because they feel so proud that their paper looks better. And if that's the benefit and if that's going to be a motivator, then it's worth the time. And for some kids, it's not worth that time. They want to get on with life. They want to just get by, and they've learned the material, so you don't need it to actually help them learn the content of the letter sound correspondence. If they're already secure on that, then maybe you don't need to work on it too much because this is a digital world and it's going to become even more digital as time goes on, right? So they will do much more of their work typing. So that's a balancing act. The correct answer is always fix it. I mean, that's the answer that's given. But we know in our classrooms we don't have time for everything we need to do. So that's part of the art, is figuring out, is it worth the fight for this child right now? That's that's for you to decide. But we do know in science that connecting the handwriting to what's happening in the sounds can improve learning the sounds faster and improve recall. So let me at least go over the confusing letters, because we still see kids at this level who have reversals with the BDP, Q type of reversal, and at least the B and the D still gives a lot of issue. Most kids have learned at third grade enough, they've learned the difference between a Q and the others, but we'll go over that. So Ito, in your population, do you see kids at your level still with MW confusion or NU confusion?
When it comes to the letter sounds, yes. And if you're discussing about just the grip, I think so as well, because yeah, I just don't know how to like test for that. But when the kids are writing, some of them are making those slight mistakes. It's tough to see it now because I've been working with all these students virtually, so it's kind of tough to be like, okay, I can't see how you're writing it, but I could see how you're typing it, or I could see what you.
So when they're reading or writing, do you see reversals with B's and D's where they start to say a word and they're using the wrong sound in the word? Or as they're writing, are they using the wrong letter between a B and a D?
I have one particular student that is, and when I was working with that student more on a one-on-one basis, I was noticing that, and I was like, okay,
So
yeah.
now I still see students at this level with B's and D's. I see far fewer with the MW or the NU confusion.
Mm. Yeah,
but so if you have those confusions, that's included in what we did yesterday. I don't remember on using the handwriting to support that. So let me show you just at least the B and the D, because I know we still see that at third grade and up. This work. All right. And this was the one I was trying to get to yesterday, and I didn't get to it. So when I'm talking about clock letters, I will have a student work actually on a clock to begin. This is what I was trying to show yesterday for the primary grades about using the clock and actually tracing on the clock. And 2 o'clock up and around and drop it to make the A. So I actually put up the clock and let them see that. But oh, come on. So when I'm looking at confusing letters, we'll talk about the B and the D is the biggest one that still affects our students 3rd grade and up. Whenever we can combine what's happening visually with what's happening, what you hear, and what's happening in your mouth and what's happening with your hand, combining all of that together, we make a stronger connection to find that piece of information again. So when we say, if the letter is B and the sound is B, B begins with the line in your mouth. So we can say, B, do you feel the line? Say it with me. B, and then look at yourself as you say it. B, do you see that line with your lips? B. So the letter B begins with a line. So we start with a line. Let me move this guy over. Start with a line. And letters that begin with a line start very close to the letter in front of it or very close to the edge of your paper. Start with the line. And if you start with the line very close, there's only one direction you can go in. Start with your line, trace it up, and make the belly. The sound is B. Again, starting with your line, trace it up and make your belly. Okay? When you're reading, if you are to read a word, the direction that we go in, if you come to the line, make your mouth into the line, which is the letter, which is the sound that starts with the line, with your mouth in a line. So I come and I hit a line. Make your mouth into a line and say, B. When you're typing it, you're going to look for the one that has the line first in the lower case. And this is where you might have to put stickers on your keyboard or have the kids, right? As if they're having this issue and they're having to type, I would encourage you to put a little sticker on that this is the B, because in the capital one, they both start with a line. But the other sound that we have to deal with that is confused here, the sound is D. Your lips are open. Say the sound and your lips are open. D. Lips are open. All of the open letters start at your 2 o'clock. Up tall, drop it down. And this is where having connected it to the A and the C and all of the other circle letters that start at 2 o'clock. Any letter that's an open letter starting at the 2 o'clock here, it's up and around, up tall, drop it down. Again, the circle part first, up tall, drop it down. And we want to say, okay, when you're saying that sound, are your lips open or closed? If the lips are open, start with the open part, the round part. D. I do not let my students write like this. That is the one thing for any of my students who have reading difficulties, any of the students who have reversal issues, that is one thing I absolutely will correct, because making that correction helps them read it and write it better, more correctly, more accurately. Okay, so that is one thing I will always correct for any student who has reversal issues. So again, starting at the open part, we're going 2 o'clock, all of our open letters starting at the 2 o'clock, up around, up tall, drop it down. You'll fix your B or D reversals without embarrassing a student. And when I say without embarrassing the students, because we've all seen the kindergarten teachers and curriculum, and I still see it all the time in professional development as reading instructors who are like, how do you fix this? And they'll say, make their hand into a bed. And they'll do this. Okay, make your hand into a bed. The B has the B starts your bed and the D ends your bed. So that's the way you look at it. But I can tell you that no one third grade and up wants to sit there, put down their pencil as they're writing and do this in class and look at their hand and say, okay, well, that's how I write or they do this one with their thumbs up. That's how I write a B or a D. No one wants to do this. So you give them what helps them so that they can correct themselves in their classroom without putting down their pencil, without embarrassing themselves. And I can see students, they'll be writing and they'll go and write their B, and then they'll go. And you can see them thinking, what's happening here?
Well, maybe
Before they write the letter.
Maybe at the younger grades, you could still include that, but say, okay, we're gonna all do the shaka, so like you put the thumbs up, or maybe when you do like this, you can say, okay, we're gonna do the itsy bitty spider for sentences, so they understand that they're just counting. I don't know.
Yeah.
Different words and phrases that'll help them to do the same thing.
Right. But I can tell you at this level, if your student is still having trouble at this level, it's because they were taught to do one of these things earlier on and they won't do it. They won't do it. So please teach them in a way that allows them to be successful ongoing. So I teach this from beginning because it connects all together, and then I don't have to worry about them still doing this in 3rd and 4th and 5th grade. Okay, so that's my suggestion. And we don't need to talk about ends and use and then piece, but we do understand, right, that it is only with these squiggles we call writing where the orientation of the object changes, right? When we talked about symmetry and object permanence, and it doesn't matter what position I hold it in, it's the same function, it's the same thing. But when we have this is what is this? Let's see, as I'm mirroring, is that a B to you? When we say that's a B, and it says B, but over here it's a D that says D, and over here it's a Q, and over here, wait, it's the same things. It's the same squiggle, it's just the orientation that has changed. So it is only in writing that this happens, where the orientation completely changes the function. So that's a normal confusion, but if a child is still having that confusion beyond 1st grade, let's fix it by helping them to write it correctly and noticing what's happening in the writing, right? So the B starts with the line, the D starts with the open part. And when they confuse N or U, then the N, your tongue is up, and the tongue is down, and whatever other confusions you have, you connect it to what's happening here. Okay. So now we get to talk about phonics. Sorry, maybe I should. I have a slide deck. When we talk about phonics, we want to talk about we connect the sound to the symbol. And then we also talk about the rules that tell us how to use the sounds or where to use the sounds. Okay, so I'm going to quickly run through, and I'm just going to say the sounds, and you will have a cheat sheet of all. So when people say, okay, do you teach one sound or do you teach all the sounds? My view is that if you're going to be running into words, many words that use a particular sound of a letter or letter team, you might as well teach it. Because the more we say, oh, that's an exception, oh, that's an exception, the more we say that, the more we're telling kids that you can't trust what you're learning to help you read. So the fewer exceptions we have, the better. But we shouldn't inundate kids with rules and terminology and things to look for that just, it's like overburdening kids. We don't want to overburden kids. So if there's a rule, like for instance, I was trying to figure out, is it a ENCE or ENSE or ANCE or ANSE in words? And I go and I read the rules about it, and I thought, shoot, I am not going to remember those rules, that in this case it is 75% chance that it's going to be this spelling, but in this case it's a 60% chance that it would be this spelling, and there's still 40% exception, and all these different instances of what to look for. It's like, forget it. In the cases where the rules are more onerous, you try to orthographically map the word as best you can, put it into long-term memory for recall, and then, and if you can't remember the spelling, that's when you use the tool. That's what spell check is for. That's what Siri is for, or Alexa, or whatever you use. And I sit there and I'll teach the kids, okay, here's what I'm going to do. Hey, Siri, how do you spell circumstance? And Siri heard me. And Siri's going to tell me how to spell circumstance, so I can know whether it was a CE or an SE at the end. Now, I actually happen to know that one, but whatever it may be, I can ask a tool. And if the tool is faster because the rules are too onerous, don't teach the rules. Don't teach the rules. That's my view. That's my view. So we want to get to basic sounds, the most common sounds, and we want to get to the most common rules that help us in most words. And if it's beyond that, then we just learn to say, in this word, we will use this spelling to represent this sound. Okay, so I'm going to just run through these very quickly, and you will have a cheat sheet that has all of these plus advanced ones and the various sounds it makes. Now, the reason a cheat sheet is nice is you can look at it and say, oh yeah, you know what, this does often make that, this spelling often represents that sound, or that sound can be represented by this spelling. So you'll have two types of cheat sheets. But let's run through this quickly. And as I say the sound, if you're like, whoa, I never thought that that made that sound, stop me, okay? So you can go ahead and unmute yourself and say them along with me if you're in a quiet area, or you can stop me when you say, I never realized that, okay? Okay, the letters A, the sounds are A, Are we good at that? So the is like in ball and walk, right? We've seen that from their very first words that they've had to learn. The I would teach from 3rd grade on up, because maybe 2nd grade, because then you get words like about and above and along and aroma, and any word where the A is at the very beginning or the very end of a word, it often says It's technically the schwa sound, but am I going to say, oh yes, it's using its schwa sound? Or am I going to say, yeah, we're going to use the A to spell in above and aroma. And I know aroma is on the 3rd grade list. So A, sounds are E. And I will always, for the 5 main vowels, I will always use the short vowel sound first, because that's the one we tend to teach first. But 3rd grade and on up, I might as well give them other sounds. Okay, so, sorry, let me just go back. There are instances where the A has other sounds. Think of, for instance, in the word many. What sound does the A represent in many? So each of these vowels can represent other sounds in crazy situations. I don't have to teach every single sound when I can say, yeah, in the word many, we use the A to spell the eh sound. The sound is eh, and I'm using the A to spell that sound. Okay? So teach as what you need to. And if it's just in 2 or 3 words, teach those words as, yep, that's what we use to spell the sound in that word. So you balance what's going to help your kids or what's going to be too much. E sounds are I, E.
Eh, I.
E.
So we all know it says and I, right? The short sound and long sound. But probably from, I don't know which grade they see this word. What's the sound of the I here?
E.
E.
E. And certainly when they get to words like marine and submarine and machine, those are all 2nd grade words, right? So at some point in there, you might as well teach them that the I will also say E. And definitely as we go from 3rd grade on up, as we meet words with a Latin origin and Greek origin, in words that come to us from these other influences, I is usually the E sound. Right? And we know in Hawaiian, what's the sound of the I in Hawaiian? E, right? So in Spanish, the sound of the I is E. So words that come to us from other languages, most often the I has the E sound, particularly in Latin words. If you see an I in front of a vowel, it's probably going to say E. Or if you hear an E sound in front of another vowel, you're probably going to spell it with an I. So I, E. Sounds are ah, o, oo,
Ah. O. U.
So the oo sound happens in very few words, but it happens right away in kindergarten level. To, do, right? So they see those right away. The sound happens, as I think I mentioned the other day, as the scribal O. We use the O to say instead or next to M's and T's and N's and letters that have these extra marks on it because it was too hard to read. So we have O saying love, other, mother, above, right? The O says So this level, I will teach all four of those sounds. Sounds are you, but actually from your level up, I will teach it. We actually, the long sound is said 2 different ways. So the long sound is you, but do you hear the component of you is y, oo? So in some words, you can't say you. So we shorten it to just the oo. So the long sounds are you or oo. If I say music, what's the sound the U is making in music?
U.
Ooh.
U.
Do you hear it saying you, music? Do you hear that y component of it? Music? Or say, I'm going to sit in a pew at church. What sound is sorry, that's not, sorry, wrong, I'm going to say sorry instead of the letter. Going back to the letter. In the word puny, a puny kid. What sound is the U making in puny?
U.
U. So after certain letters, we use the long sound U. But if I have this word, do we say U?
No.
No, we say oo. So we can't get it out of our mouth after an R. We can't say Rule. It just like, ugh, doesn't happen. So we say rule, right? So whether or not you teach it as 2 long sounds or just 1 long sound and say, yeah, we just can't always say it that way, I don't care. But then the other sound it makes is as in put. And most kids have learned those few words where it has the sound in the early grades. So put and butcher and those are the commonest words, most common words. They might not need even to learn the sound much after that. So you, oo, and possibly Okay, so I like to exercise our kids because it's the vowels that give us the most trouble. And I'll say, okay, let's say the short sounds. And we'll do it in order. Then we'll do it out of order. So everyone knows their long sounds, the names of the letter. So let's do the short sounds, please.
A.
Eh,
Eh.
for this one.
Eh.
Now, the terminology of short and long, I don't even like using those terms because it's less meaningful in our language. There are many languages where the short sound is actually held very shortly in your mouth, and the long sound is held for a longer duration. That happens less in English. But still we use the terminology, and I know it's in the standards, so we have to teach the terminology because it's in the standards. But we don't hear that it's said for a very short time. That doesn't happen in English. So I will say it's the short sound because it's the sound you make when it's a short word with a single letter after it. An, right? Ed, it, on, So if I say it's the sound you make in a short little word with just 1 letter after it, that's how short it is. That's the short sound. And the long sounds are the names. If you still have standards where you have to teach short and long, go ahead and use that terminology. If you don't, just tell them the sounds that you're going to use. So one exercise that I like to do with kids is, and they know the names of the letters, A, E, I, O, U, is to go out of order, right? So, and I might say, okay, now I want you to tell me the long sound first, or the name first, and then the short sound as I point to it. So I want to hear you say, O, ah, and E, eh. And this one would be
A,
and.
U,
Okay. Or I might say, now tell it to me and tell me the short sound first and then the long sound. Ready, go.
E, I, A, O.
Good. So we'll do that because we really want mastery of these vowel sounds represented by these letters. Those you absolutely have to have mastery. And here's the beauty. I'm going to talk to you for a second about the beauty of working in the upper grades. The hardest words we have to teach happen kindergarten through 2nd grade. Because the hardest words we have to teach come from the Anglo-Saxon influence of the English language. The Anglo-Saxons were the farmers. They were the everyday workers. They were the people, in their homes, in their fields. All of our everyday words come from the Anglo-Saxons. They are the oldest influence, primarily the oldest influence to the English language. It had all those crazy spellings, the AI, the EIGH, the EY, the IGH. They had the crazy spellings. So primarily you're going to hit most of those words through 2nd and 3rd grade. So if you can get your kids through those words, actually, third, fourth grade on up is actually easier because at that point, 90% of the words, the new vocabulary that you will read and learn are Latin influence. And there's about 5% that's Greek influence, and then a small percent that has other influence. 90% Latin influence. Guess what? Latin influence, the vowels are either going to have the short sound or the long sound, and they use very little of the odd EIGH spellings. Okay, and I have a visual on that I will put into our packet so you can see which spellings come from which language group. Okay, so basically, fourth grade and up is much easier to teach. If you have mastery on those 5, you have to have mastery on those 5. And the other ones, you know, if you don't have mastery on them, you might be able to get by, but just saying in this word we're using this spelling to represent that sound. Okay. So I like to say teaching fourth grade is easier than teaching first grade because of that. So Latin influence, those 5 vowels, and using the 2 main sounds of those 5 vowels is what you absolutely have to mastery. And if you have that, you will be able to decode with our syllabication rules. You'll be able to decode almost all of the new words you will come to. Okay? So it gets easier, not harder. All right, let's go back to, where did it go? Going through some of the other sounds, and I'm going to just do the other sounds quickly. You can just listen to me, and then you will have your cheat sheet as reference, but I want you to just at least hear the pronunciation of the sounds. One of the reasons that's important is that we as teachers tend to put a vowel at the end of any consonant. We're trying to project across a classroom. In order to project, what do we need? More breath. What provides the breath in a word? The vowels. So if I'm projecting to, you know, a full classroom, it's really hard to say yeah, yeah, and have everyone hear me say the Y sound or w, w. So it's easier to say yeah or b and project my voice. We have to minimize that vowel impact as much as possible so they hear the most pure sound. So the kids aren't trying to blend ka-atta, and they can't go from ka-atta to cat. They have to go from k-at to blend, right? So keeping the vowel sounds, the vowel additives to a minimum. The sound is b, my lips are closed. 2 sounds, k, s. And our rule is that C can say S in front of E, I, and Y. And it does that every time it's in front of E, I, or Y, it says S. So if you have to spell the K sound in front of an E, I, or Y, use a K, because the C would say S. So the sounds are K, S. And you're going to get the list of rules, but I just want you to hear me go through this. D, lips open. And our kids have issue with between the F, the V, and the TH. Some get the FV mixed up, some get the FTH mixed up, right? So it's a bathtub, right? And some kids will do the FV. So paying attention to what happens in your mouth. Your teeth are touching your lower lip. The V is the same position, but you are vibrating your vocal cords. It's called a voiced sound. So say and you'll see that what's happening in your mouth is exactly the same. The difference is what's happening here, where you're allowing your vocal cords to vibrate more. But if they're messing up the F and the TH, is your teeth on your lip, the TH, your tongue is out. And I tell kids it's the one time you're allowed to stick your tongue out at the teacher to say, right? So either lip in with your teeth on the lip for this one, not to be confused with the TH. The sounds are g, j. And both of these start with your lips open. So if any of your students confuse the G with the PQ, the P, B, D, the G and the J, both of them are lips open. We start writing it from the open position. Okay. And it may say J in front of E, I, or Y, but it doesn't always. But it may say J in front of E, I, and Y. The sound is H. And I know I've been hearing that the microphone thinks that I'm just breathing and it tries to remove that sound. So you might not even hear me say, I don't know, did you hear that? Okay. J. And at the beginning of a word, we only use the K in front of E, I, or Y. That's the only time we're going to use it, except in the word skull, because it came to us, it's where it came to us. And, it's a Greek influence, blah, 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 blah. But basically, you tell the kids you're only going to use that in front of E, I, and Y. And at the end of the word, we have another rule. Ugh. And we want to make sure, do they have their tongue up when they say ugh? And your lips are closed. It is a nasal sound. So nasal sounds sometimes change the sound of the vowel in front of it a little bit. Just be aware if people are like, I don't say, what was it someone said? Hem, like I forget what word nasal sounds can influence the vowel just in front of it a little bit. Just, it's like, okay, go back to, in this word, we're going to use this letter to represent this sound. If you're finding that issue. It's a nasal sound. It will also influence the sound of the vowel directly in front of it, right? Because it's happening at the back of your throat. So as your mouth structure, your tongue and everything's moving to slide the sound back so it can come up through your nose, that moving your tongue back might mess up the vowel in front of it. And I always represent the Q with the U. When we say qu, the U is not a vowel. Say the sounds qu. What do you hear? Qu. You actually hear a k, w. And so the U is not a vowel here. It is representing the w sound. W. And this is the hardest one to produce. We don't want and we don't want r. We want to keep it as minimal as possible and just say r. And this is the one that will give our kids the most trouble. Two sounds. S, z. It will always say s at the beginning of a base word. At the end, it generally says z, but not always. But if you hear a z sound at the end of a word, quite often it's the S. And here, same as the F, except you're vibrating. And your teeth are on your lip. The sound is w. And we call it W because it used to be written with, there was not a W letter. So they printed two U's together to represent the W sound before we had the W letter. So they printed two U's together and then they started saying, okay, we'll call it a W. But then at the time when the printing changed and they made it two V's. So it looks like two V's, but it's W. And this represents two phonemes, two sounds. Stuck together. So that the socks rhymes with fox. This represents two phonemes. I'm going through this quickly, and I know I know it's not something that you need to know and use all of it, but I want you to just hear it once. Okay, this one represents a vowel and a consonant. So when we talked about vowels and consonants, a vowel is the unrestricted flow of air through your vocal cords. And we'll go through that exercise again. But anything that allows your vocal cords, the air to pass through without interference between your lips, teeth, tongue, and jaw, it's a vowel. If you shape the flow of air, it's a consonant. So the y sound is the consonant. Y. The I, e sounds are vowels. So we have the y sound at the very beginning of a base word. Any other position of English words, so we know Japanese words are different, but any other position of English words, the Y represents the vowel sounds I, or E. Okay. Should you teach all of them? I think so, because first graders, kindergartners, they have to learn the word my. They learn baby. They might not learn gym or for gymnasium, the sound, but they will get to right? Bicycle. So you might as well teach the sounds and just say, yep, it's a hardworking letter. It makes all those sounds. Zzz. And this is one where letters that begin with a line start very close to the letter in front of it is helpful so that you don't get the backwards writing on the Z. So start it very close to the letter in front and go across. Start from there. Okay. Digraphs, trigraphs, when you have letters working together to make a new sound. So I'm not saying huh. These are working together to make a new sound. The sound is sh. So the English language has 44 letters, 44 sounds, thereabout, depending on dialect. We don't have that many letters, right? So letters have to double up. So the SH together say sh. Two sounds. Ugh. One is unvoiced and one is voiced. So say thin, and then say that. Do you feel the difference of the sounds? Okay, two sounds. And your tongue is out. And I say, oh, I didn't see your tongue on that one. Let me see your tongue. So when they say that, it's like, okay, I saw your tongue. Good. Three sounds. Ch, sh, ch is the most common, comes from the Anglo-Saxons. Is the Greek sound. And it's in words like Christmas and chaos. So if your students have to learn Christmas, just, tell them, yeah, the CH can say k, and then it says sh in the French influenced words like machine and mustache and champagne, chandelier. And you can be silly. Yes, I will sit under the chandelier and I will drink my champagne and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, so it has the sh sound. So ch, sh. Okay, two sounds. What? So what is where, when, right? If it's in front of an O, it says like who, whole, hose, whom. All right? And most of those are question words, although not all. Whole is not a question word. And it's just, that's the way it came to us. That's what we still have. But we're using the WH to spell. Greek influence. And you're going to see kid after kid after kid that's going to want to say were. And it's like, nope. So how do we teach kids when to use the WR versus the R? And this is the only one where this letter combination came to us, most of the words have to do with twisting. I'm going to write. You see the twisting motion? My wrist can move. See the twisting? I'm going to wrestle. So those are basically the most common words where they will use this WR. So I will combine it. That, remember, it's twisting, so use the WR. Or I'm going to wring out my watch. Right? See that twist? So the sound is R with no W component at all. Don't pronounce it at all. E, R, but if it's in the last syllable of a word, it might say like dollar. We don't say dollar, say dollar. But when we're teaching kids to spell, we can say, let's think to spell dollar, if that helps them, just like I still say Wednesday to spell Wednesday. So you can say, let's think dollar, although we say dollar, and the AR can have the sound. Or, and again, it can say if it's the suffix of a word, right? An actor, do we say actor, right? So we can tell kids, let's think actor to help us remember the spelling, but the sound is or. Three sounds, oo, o. And for this one, it's like, is that the craziest thing to have to deal with? Ooh, oh. And I would say, don't eat the food you took off the floor. Give them a visual memory. Ooh, oh. But most kids, if they're anywhere near grade level, they will read most of the more common words with this by third grade. But they're going to still meet quite a few that they will have to know to try either the oo sound or the sound and see which one works. Oi. This also says oi, but it's never used at the end of an English word. A, never used at the end of an English word. Ow, oh, ooh, There's so many of these crazy sounds. E, a, never used at the end of an English word. Used only after a single short vowel. J, used only after a single short vowel. Ch, used only after a single short vowel. O or oo. O. Ed, d, t, the past tense ending. Were. So the word is word or work, not war, right? So it's were. War. Three sounds, ear, air, air, often, like I will marry someone, right? I will carry my books, but not always, because I have words like arrive. Air, like cherry or berry. So, I wasn't done. I, and used only at the end of a word or in front of a T, ei, sh. This is a Latin ending. Listen to the sound sh. Is the I a vowel here? So when I have nation, action, competition, or any of the words that end with shus, or even dementia, this is representing the sh sound. The I is not a vowel. It can only live as the sh sound if the next letter is a vowel. Okay? Sh. Or j, like division. So it has that voiced sound, division. I hate this one. A. E. Sometimes I, sometimes I, but mostly A and E. E, and sometimes I, like in the word I, it's representing the I sound. And the K used to be pronounced. We no longer pronounce the K, so it's just n. And This is interesting because we have the N sound in the word sign. Ein. But related to it is the word signal. And there we pronounce the G, signal, or a signet ring, or my signature, where I will sign the word. So these combinations came to us from old writing. Pronunciation has changed. We don't say, I can't even say it, like, I can't pronounce the G and the N together in one syllable, like sign. But when we split the syllables, signature, we hear both, we hear the both each making their own sound. Ooh, like fruit and juice. Ooh or you, like few and new. And I don't even bother teaching this anymore, except for the kids who really like to show off. Because at this point, you might as well just learn the words, right? Rather than how much time does it take you to practice? Oh, ooh, f, off, ah, ow. When really what you want to get to is I can spell the word although, or though, or I can read the word though and although. Ooh, like through. Like tough or rough. Off, like bought or thought. And ow, like bow. The only word I've ever had to read is boughs of holly, or some old literature where they talk about the boughs on the ground from after the storm, or old literature where they spelled plow with O-U-G-H to say ow. I don't bother teaching all the sounds here, but I'm just going to end up teaching the words because the words are fewer and easier to learn. Okay, that was a very quick, and I'm going to tell you, it took me forever to learn it. No one learns it in a day. We don't expect our kids to learn it in a day. Prioritize. What is it that you want them to accomplish? And let's prioritize those sounds. Okay, I know that was way too much. So please unmute yourself for a second and tell me, was there anything that surprised you, or anything that you're like, oh, that's why that happens?
No, well, I'll make a warning to a person here. Jackie, you have something in your background? Jackie, you have something that looks like it may hit you in the back. If you turn around, anything. Okay, I just want to make sure that everyone is.
That's for this guy.
Before I do anything, I was like, okay, making sure it doesn't hit Jackie. But yeah, I think it was really good. I think learning some of those basic principles of the vowel sounds and how they connect, I think that'll help a lot of the students, at least in my class, to decode. And then another aha moment that I had was learning about encoding, because we always hear about this is how to decode, this is how to decode, this is decoding, but very rare, at least in my experience, and I don't know if my other fellow educators here have that same feeling, like you don't really hear that word encoding as much. So those were some of the things that I learned.
Okay.
So we do the encoding, I guess, in pre-K with Debbie Morrow. I guess it just wasn't labeled as encoding. So we do the speech to text where they'll draw a picture, they'll tell us what the picture or story is about, and we'll write it for them, and then we'll reread it to them. So as far as the labeling part, thank you, because we don't usually label that, but we do it in pre-K.
Good, yes. So it shouldn't stop in pre-K. That's the message. It shouldn't stop, because at whatever point you're going to teach. So if you've got 5th grade vocabulary, 6th grade vocabulary, start with the word. Start with the word. Don't start with the printed. Start with the word. Okay, so the word is knowledge, or whatever your 5th grade or 6th grade word might be, restricted, or whatever it is. And it's, okay, so here's our word. Let's listen. What sounds do you hear? What are your syllables that you hear? What are we saying? Okay, and then we'll talk about morphology, because we want to marry morphology with phonology and then drop in our spelling rules to help us. So we bring in the meaning and the sound. You have to marry meaning and sound because you can't do it by sound alone. That's when we see kids who are in 5th grade and they write where they spell things purely phonetically, and it's like, okay, how do we get them from, that's good. I mean, that's a good first step, but how do we get them beyond that? So we have to marry sound and meaning. So when we use the affixes, prefixes, suffixes, root words, base words, and combine the meaning. So when I say commit, do you hear 2 M's in commit?
No.
Do you hear 2 M's when I say commit? No, I don't hear 2 M's. I have to spell it with 2 M's, but you'll see kids, okay, commit, K, or C, U, mit, MIT. Okay, but when we start to marry the sounds with the meaning, it means, mit means to put or place, com means together. So if we commit, we are placing our interests together. We're putting them together, right? I am committing to this. And usually a commitment is together with another person or another group. So com is spelled C-O-M. So I'm going to take the meaning of the prefix com and the meaning of the suffix mit, and that helps me know I have 2 M's because I can combine not just the sound, but the meanings together. So we need to do both. And then we add in the spelling rules so that we know that I now have to double the T if I'm going to add a vowel suffix to make committed, right? Things like that. So meaning, sound, sprinkle on spelling rules, but going from whatever your vocabulary is, starting from the word itself, the oral word that has meaning in your head or that you're trying to communicate the meaning, to the sound, to the spelling. And then as you look at that, then you can analyze it. And then we get that shared self-teaching hypothesis where you've done the analysis, you know the sounds, you know the pieces putting together. So then when you see permit, that's easier. Or if you see committance or whatever other things that might be related, it fits together better when you marry sound, meaning, spelling rules, starting with the word itself. So going from speech to print, not just in pre-K and K, but even at the higher levels. Okay. As we just talked about the sounds represented by these letters and letter teams, any ahas or any, oh, I never realized that, or anything like that, or surprises?
I didn't realize that the WR was mainly twisting. That's new. I never knew that.
Yeah, so that's one helpful thing, because there are sometimes when we have no way of telling a student in a satisfactory manner that why you use an IE versus EE versus a EA versus a E or whatever it may be. There are 8 ways to spell the E sound. There are 8 ways to spell the A sound. And it's like, I can't give you a hard and fast rule that you're always going to use this here. So sometimes those little bits of knowledge help, and sometimes it's just going to be, yep, this word uses the AI to say A. That word uses the A with the E at the end. So, okay, anyone else?
So for me, it was the rule with the ending of the S, because I always say Z rather than the S sound. I just because I learned it that way, like with Mrs. Chavez. I can't even say Chavez. See, I always default to the Z. not
Yeah.
the S. And then with the R, like I can't even enunciate the sound. It will always be not the way
Okay.
you said it. So I don't know how to get out of that like
Okay.
habit.
So that's a good word. It's a habit. We can learn to undo habits. And here's one thing that we'll have kids and say, oh, I just can't do that. I can't do that. And it's like, whoa, right? Growth mindset here. We can. You are allowed to say it's difficult. You are allowed to say that's a hard habit to break. You're allowed to say, I need help with this. Don't tell me you can't unless your tongue is cut off. You physically don't have the right. So don't say can't. Let's say, yeah, that's tough to break. Okay, so I had to learn this in my 40s, right? It's a lot of this. I didn't. I started learning in my 40s. Okay, that's a lot of years of having to break habits, right? So we can, and it's difficult, and we can do it. And that's our job as teachers, is to help our students retrain, do it. So that being aware is the first step. Like I was having a hard time. I say Chavez with a z, and it's like Chavez, Chavez, Chavez with a s. And it's like, okay, but we have words like bus. We don't say buzz. Like I'm going to ride on the bus, or I made a mess. Do you say mez? You do? Okay. So it's going to be retraining, just retraining, right? For me, it's like, okay, here's a situation where I've done that. So I work from what I can do and then get to what I need to do. For instance, the O saying is the hardest sound for kids to isolate. I don't know why. It just is and people say they'll get all these other combinations. So okay, let's go from what we do know. What's this thing called? What's this thing called? Somebody say it.
Book.
Good, excellent. Say it again. Everyone say it.
Book.
Okay. Okay. Now you can do it either way. Okay. Let's say it again without the k.
Book.
But now say it without the b.
Book.
Right? And your jaw is a little bit forward. Okay, let's say, oh, I want to cook. Everyone tell me what you're going to do. What do we need to do to get our dinner? We're going to cook.
Good.
Okay, say it without, guess what? We have both places. Ready? Let's take away the ending. Take away the beginning. So going from what you know down to what you don't know. So what's difficult, and then doing that phonemic manipulation can help you get to what is difficult. And since phonemic manipulation is helpful, doing it every chance you need to doesn't hurt, right? So I can that's a really hard sound to isolate. And I can tell you most of my kids, it's like ooh, and it's like, do you say buck? What's this thing called? Is it a buck? No, it's a book. Okay, so it's a book. Let's isolate that sound. What are we saying when we say book? And getting them back down to what that pure sound is. Okay, so now let's say like, so if the word was mistook and they're not able to get that word and say, okay, well let's go from book to took. Take away the book, put in it. What's it now? Took. Good. Took. Now let's say it in mistook, just adding on. So some of the sounds are odd, but going from what you do know to scaffold to get to where you want to be. So we can learn to say S at the end, and it's going to take some retraining, but we can do it. So for me, it was like, okay, I do say bus. I say bus. So So if I say bus, can I say Bess? Can I say Vess? Okay, let's say Vess again. Or going from vest to Vess. And then Chavez. All right. We have a half hour left, and I want to talk about, we're going to just very quickly look at syllabicating longer words without suffixes, because reading with suffixes takes a little longer, so we're going to spend more time on that tomorrow. Suffixes change the spelling. So we're all aware, you've all taught, where you sometimes drop the silent E or where you double a letter in the spelling aspect of it. So when we go to decoding, so now flipping into decoding, when you go to decode, those spelling rules affect the way we decode a word. So we're going to talk about the basic steps for decoding multisyllabic words. And I want to do that right now before we leave, because I'm hoping that everyone will come back tomorrow with a list of crazy words. Words that you knew were difficult for your students to read, words that are just difficult, period, and we are going to decode them together. Okay? And preferably not foreign language words, not purely foreign language words. Words that are now in English is fine, but if it's a purely foreign language word, we don't need to do that. But so I'm going to ask all of you to please bring in some words, crazy words tomorrow. We will work on them together, and we'll talk more about suffixes tomorrow and the affixes and morphology. So morphology, the word morphology, a morpheme is the smallest unit of meaning. A phoneme is the smallest unit of sound, like b, k, d, eh, right? Smallest units of sounds. A morpheme is the smallest unit that changes, morphs the meaning of a word. Like we know that adding an S, the S is a morpheme all by itself. By adding the S to eat to become eats, we've changed the meaning. S is not always a morpheme, because if I change top to stop, the S has no meaning by itself, right? The whole word has meaning. But when I use it as a suffix, it has meaning. Ed has meaning, means in the past. Ing has meaning. Prefixes have meaning, right? If I redo something, if I pre-bake something, or if I have a submarine, or if I have an interstage or an interaction, prefixes have meaning. Suffixes have meanings. All the roots have meaning. So a morpheme is the smallest unit that has meaning. And sometimes we have to put letters in to connect them, but it's the smallest unit that has meaning. Many of our words from 3rd grade on up, we attack not just by the decoding rules, but also by connecting meaning. The more we can connect meaning in addition to syllabication rules, the more we're able to close the gap on vocabulary, right? By helping our students recognize that the parts can have meaning, you don't have to teach every word. You don't have to teach prefix, preschool, pre-make, pre-bake, preheat. By learning pre means done before, it cuts down on the amount that you have to teach. So one of the resources I'll have in there is list most common prefixes and suffixes that are like highest priority to make sure our kids know, and most common roots that we want to make sure our kids are starting to hear them and see them so that they will bump up. And teaching them these parts improves decoding. It's not just improving vocabulary, it improves decoding, because then they start to see the parts. Okay. So steps for decoding multisyllabic words. Step number 1 is to notice your prefixes and suffixes. Okay. Step 1, notice prefixes and suffixes. And when I say notice them, be aware of them. Sometimes we think something's a prefix and it's not. Like re is often a prefix, but in of course, right now, every word I'm thinking of, re is a prefix. Rep. I'll think of it. Anyway, we're going to notice prefixes. Oh, okay, like re is, but in the word red, is re a prefix? No. So we're going to look at, is it a prefix? We're going to look at, I think this is a suffix. We're going to notice those things. That's step 1. Step 2, look for any letter teams. Letters that you know work together to make a sound. Let's notice them. Now, I'm going to give you the global view so that we can work step by step. And then we're going to look at, as we get better, how we will go just left to right. So generally in reading and spelling, we don't say, think of your suffix first. We don't want to think about the end of the word first. But as we become aware, we're going to just really break it down at the beginning. Eventually, we want to get to where we're just doing it from left to right, going through the word. But for now, step 1, prefixes and suffixes. And any root words that you know are in there. Let's go ahead and notice them. Step 2, notice any letter teams. Is that a TI that says shh? Is that a TH that says, is it an EA that has to work together to make one sound? Is it a AI that works together to make a sound? Whatever. So that's why the familiarity with the phonics part of it, knowing the sounds, is foundational to reading multisyllabic words. We don't have to have complete mastery, but we want at least familiarity. Okay? So step 1, prefix suffixes, any morphology, any word parts. Step 2, letter teams that work together. Step 3, which are your vowels? Which are your vowels? From there, we're going to split up the word. What we looked at the other day, and we're going to do it again today, and actually, who was here on the other day when we talked about vowels, what a vowel is, and would like to practice teaching it? Anyone? Bernie, you want to try to teach that? Or Lori? You want to practice teaching that with us?
Okay, I'll try.
Okay, so Lori, you can either share a Jamboard if you want, or you can just hold it up and use your whiteboard.
Okay, I'll use my whiteboard.
Please be aware that if you're in this situation with students, you have a lot of light behind you. It means that you're silhouetted. So
Okay.
often you want to not teach. Okay.
Because I have trouble presenting because I can't see everyone else. Because can you see when you present? Because I can only see what I'm presenting. I can hear them, but I can't see what they're doing. Unless I have my phone on. Because I don't have another device to turn on. That's why I like
So
using
when you're
the whiteboard.
okay, I get it.
Then I can see what my student.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah. So I used to split my before I got my other.
Yeah, I tried.
But then it's small,
screen.
Right?
Yeah, I tried splitting screen and then I get that echo, and it's really weird.
That shouldn't happen with a split screen. That's joining the meet twice. You don't want to join the meet twice.
Oh, I think that's what I was doing. I was splitting the screen and then I was joining the meet in both screens.
Yeah, you don't need to do that. You just keep what you're teaching from in one side and your view of the people in the other side.
Okay, I'll try that next time.
But in any case, use what works, right? Whiteboards work. Go for it. Document cameras work. Go for it.
Okay, so when you have a vowel in a word, it gives the breath to the word. And I'm just going to use the same example you did. So For example, if you were at the beach and you saw someone in trouble in the water and you want to call for someone, oops. Oh, my pen is dead.
Of course, when I put you on the spot, right?
Oh, shoot. My water spilled. Sorry. Okay, I'll just use paper. Okay, so if you're trying to call for someone, maybe a lifeguard. I don't know if you can see this. Can you see that?
Oh, okay, yes.
Okay, so if you're kind of trying to call for someone, someone is drowning and you're trying to call for someone, a lifeguard, but you don't have a vowel in your word, all you're saying is hope, hope,
Ooh,
hope.
ooh,
But
ooh,
if you add the vowel in it, you give a breath to your word. You add the E in there, the vowel, and then you can stretch out your word and you can say help. So the vowel in this word, it's the E, is the breath in your word. So you can say help. How was that?
Okay, so I teach that vowels save lives. Vowels save lives. Okay, so we cannot live without breathing. Words can't live without vowels. The vowel, the dictionary definition of a vowel is the unrestricted flow of air through the vocal cords. The sound produced by the unrestricted flow of air through the vocal cords, right? So as air is coming up from your lungs through the vocal cord, when air comes out of your lungs, what do we call that? It's breathing, right? Air in, air out, it's breathing. So this is what allows our words to live. So anything that provides that breath is the vowel. That means that it's not just A, E, I, O, U. Sometimes it's a O, W, O, ow, or the E, I, G, H. Who knew a G, H could be part of a vowel, right? A. It is the unrestricted flow of air in your syllable. Every syllable needs a breath. Every syllable needs a vowel sound. Every vowel sound is in its own syllable because every time you breathe, you're making a new syllable. So when we teach feeling the syllables, you want to go for that, Laurie? Or Bernie, you want to do that part? No? Yes? No? Laurie, you want to go for it?
Feeling the vowels?
Feeling, so you're able to identify the syllables in a word or the number of syllables in a word even.
So you can feel the breath while you're speaking when you say a word. Like syllable, you can feel each time there's breath coming out, you can feel the vibration in your
Vocal
neck,
cords.
in your vocal cords.
All right, kids hate doing that. Kids hate doing it. And it's like, oh, I don't know. Why do they hate touching their neck? I don't know. And they'll do either grabbing too hard or they'll be like this, like, you're not going to feel it like this. Don't, you know. So what is another method of feeling the breath? Bernie, what's another method of feeling the breath in a word if you don't want to touch your neck?
You can hum it.
Okay, you can hum it. You can hum it. Kids don't mind humming. Because, okay, so if vowels are the breath and consonants use your teeth, lips, tongue to shape it. So if you're not using your teeth, lips, or tongue, all you have left is the vowel. All you have left is the breath. So say computer, computers, hum it. Can you feel that all you've got is that breath? Right? So Kids are more willing to hum than they are to do this. So if this doesn't make sense to kids, and I can tell you that 3rd grade on up, they don't like to sit there and do this as they're trying to figure out the spelling of a word, because you want to segment to break it down into manageable portions. Kids don't like doing this in 3rd grade anymore. So, but they will hum things. And they do it under their breath as they're writing. Okay, so then they can focus. What was that first syllable? Calm. Okay. And then they can attend to the sound within that syllable. You. Her. So in any case, we're trying to get through decoding, which is, I know I kind of jumped ahead instead of spending more time on the encoding and the orthographic mapping. We will go back there tomorrow, but I wanted to do enough of this today so that we could have an assignment to bring with us tomorrow. So jumping back into decoding, we want to know what vowels are. You have to know what a vowel is. So you have to identify in this word that you see, the strange string of letters, which are the vowels. Because each vowel is going to be in its own part, its own syllable. And if there's an EA, they're going to stay together because they make one sound. That's why we have to notice those first. So I'm going to demonstrate with just a couple of words the process before we close today. And then we will work more on this tomorrow in addition to orthographic mapping and the other things that are still on our list. Okay. So if I have I'm going to pick a word that one of my students was so proud of. Let's see, is it working?
You're not sharing your screen.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So none of our kids are going to get to this word, but we're going to use this as an example because this is not a word. Is this a familiar word to any of you? Okay, good. So I want you to realize that, you know this word, Bernie? So I want you to realize that we can sit there and say, oh my goodness, and work our way through it. But every word that a student doesn't know is as difficult looking to them as this might be to us. This is what they're faced with all the time, hundreds of times a day. So we're going to look at this. Step 1. What was step 1? Go ahead and unmute yourself. You're going to do this with me, please. What is step 1?
Notice
Prefix
prefixes.
and suffix.
Do you see anything here that you know? And if you don't, that's okay.
I'm assuming SES and IAN.
What do they mean?
I'm not sure.
Okay, so prefixes and suffixes have meaning, right? Morphemes are parts that have meaning. So if you know it, mark it. If you don't know it, let's not mark it. I happen to know that AN is a suffix that means a person, like American. But you know, if you don't notice it, fine. We're not going to notice it. Step 2. Step 2 is
Letter teams.
excellent. What do you see?
QU.
Yes, and QU trumps UI. Because we know Q always goes with U. Anything else? No. And you know what? Most of the words that you meet, of the hard words that you're going to meet, most of them don't have the crazy letter teams. Okay, here we go. Step 3.
Isolate the vowels.
Okay, let's just mark it. I'm going to mark my vowel. What are my vowels? Starting at the beginning.
E.
E. Is the U a vowel here?
I.
The next one's an I. Next vowel. And I'm actually asking vowel sounds. I'm sorry, I'm taking the shortcut. So what are your vowel sounds? Next one.
Eh.
Yeah, so here. Well, we don't, sorry. When I say U is technically a vowel, but it's not making a vowel sound, so I'm not going to indicate it. And if I had a silent E, it's a vowel, but it's not making a sound, so I'm not going to indicate it. So which are the that are making sounds? So we've got here, there, and there. How many vowel sounds do I have?
6.
6.
6. So I'm going to end up with 6 syllables because every breath is its own syllable. Okay. So between these two vowels, how many consonant sounds how many consonant sounds, teams, letters, whatever do I have?
3.
3. Okay, so if I have 3, I have to split them up. Most likely I'm going to split them up. Where would it make sense to split it? And this is why I have this underlined here. Because it's underlined, I'm not going to split those. So because that's going to, they're kind of locked together, I'm going to split it here. Between these two, how many consonant sounds are there?
1.
1. Here's one generalization. If there's one consonant, 75% of the time, you're going to split your syllable in front of it. 25% of the time, you'll split your syllable after it. So this is where we might have to try it one way and then try it the other way. But I'm going to try it the way that is most likely. So most likely, it's going to be there. Okay. Between these two vowels,
1.
1.
what am I going to do?
Split it before.
Split it in front of the D. Good. Split it in front. Between the A and the I,
1.
what am I going to do?
Split it before.
Between the I and the A, nothing. But they each have to be in their own syllable, so I just have to split them up. Okay. Now here's where we have to know 2 rules. 3 rules. If a syllable ends with a consonant, the vowel uses its short sound, or you don't want to use short and long, you can say if a syllable ends with a consonant, the A says ah, the E says eh, whatever. However you want to do it. So if a syllable ends with a consonant, the vowel uses its short sound. If the syllable ends with a vowel, A, E, O, and U will almost always say the long sound. A, E, O, and U. The I, it's kind of a 50-50. It might say the short sound or the long sound. Okay? So if the syllable ends with a vowel, the A, E, O, U will say their long sounds. The I could say I, could say I. You have to try both sounds. Okay. I have one more rule right in here that I had mentioned earlier. If you have an I in front of a vowel, what does the I usually say? Anyone remember that from earlier? The sounds of the I are I, E.
E.
Generally, if the I is in front of another vowel, it's going to say E. Okay, so let's just go right front to back. We're going to read this word. First syllable ends with a consonant. The vowel says eh. The syllable is
Ses.
ses. Second syllable ends with a I. The I actually usually says I. It's about 50-50. So let's try the I sound.
Quit.
Good.
Quit. Next one ends with the E. What's the E going to say?
Eh.
Eh.
If a syllable ends with the vowel, the A, E, O, U will almost always say the long
Oh,
vowel.
E.
E.
E. Okay, so right now, what do we have again?
Sequity.
Next syllable ends with an A.
Day.
Day. Next syllable ends with an I, and it's in front of a vowel.
Li.
The. Last syllable.
An.
So sesquipedalian. And learning where to put the accent, the stress on it. We often have to just tell the student where the stress goes in an unusual word. That generally they're not going to read this word for a while, right? So generally it's the first syllable that's not a prefix, but verbs, it can be the last syllable. So sesquipedalian, and you just broke apart however many letters this is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 letters into a 6-syllable word. Each syllable you were able to decode, correct? Because we segmented it. So I can take a child that has just the basic vowel sounds and those 3 rules that we just mentioned, and they can decode this word. Now, I wouldn't start with this word, obviously, but it is a booster because it means a lover of long words.
That's funny.
I know it as long-winded.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Bernie. So, it's technically long words. A person who is sesquipedalian is long-winded. Yes. Okay. So we just the steps. The steps themselves were not hard. But just like throwing free throws at the free throw line, you sit there and you do it again and again and again and again and again until it becomes more automatic. We can work this process. We're, knowing that we're spending time on phonemic awareness. We're spending time on phonics. We're pretty good on those 2 most foundational portions. This is a skill that we can learn and practice so it becomes easier. And just like standing there at the free throw line, you can become better and faster at it. So instead of having to go step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, they're able to say ses, qui, p, de, lien, which is what most of us probably did without realizing we were doing that, right? Right? We did that without thinking about it because those steps have become ingrained in our brain without realizing that we're doing it. That's what we want for our students. But for those that need that explicit instruction, we give them the explicit instruction. We let them practice it so they too can have the automaticity at it. Because if you take a word that's above 8 letters and you throw it in front of a student who knows that he's a struggling reader, he looks at the first letter, maybe the first 2 letters, and then he guesses. Because he has not been explicitly taught how to do this. Okay, so the assignment for tomorrow, we will talk about orthographic mapping. We will talk about doing more work with spelling, vocabulary work, and morphology. But I wanted to show you this so that you could know one of the things we'll work on tomorrow, and that if you could please bring in some words, some crazy words, or words that your own students have had trouble with, and we'll look at how do we analyze it. And then we will talk about how suffixes affect that, because that's a big deal. I want to, before I leave you today, I want to give you a resource that has the basic, which one is it in? How many tabs open again? That has the sounds and the basic rules. And I had it pulled up. You know, let me stop the recording because that's, I know, is what's messing me up.